All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
All right. Here we are, our weekly get-together, talking coaching, youth baseball coaching, and we sprinkle in some advanced coaching along the way. Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Coach Bo with you here. Fired up, our weekly get-together. We're just trying to be better coaches, and I think weekly getting together here, a 25, a 30, a 35-minute episode that will continue to help shape and mold our coaching paradigm. Some of it's just refresher, some of it's brand new to you, the listener. At the end of the day, I think it's an ongoing, continual process. Think about how many years great coaches take to get to where they're at. How many years and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of coaching to get to where they're at. So what I've gone and done is take as much wisdom, get as much wisdom from the baseball coaching community, from all the great coaches, not just in baseball, but from every sport, the great coaches, the Sabans, the Woodens, the coaches that run the Navy SEALs, and people that run successful businesses, successful, healthy businesses where they're providing an awesome service or a product and they're doing it in a good way. They're doing it in a culture that's very positive. We've taken from everywhere and we've brought it here. And week to week, every week, we get together and we help shape and mold and hone and sharpen our paradigm, our coaching paradigm through all that information. And what I'm trying to do is filter it down. I'm trying to filter it and vet it out for you because I have been in the baseball community for 35 plus years now. I've been a coach for 17 years. I played for a high-level high school program, a high-level Division I college program at Long Beach State for 4 years. I played parts of 3 seasons in professional baseball. I've been drafted twice. Didn't make it to the major leagues, but up to that, I've seen pretty much everything there is to see out there when it comes to each level, and I know what's expected. My high school baseball program was second to none. The college program, Long Beach State, speaks for itself, and playing professional baseball, be it briefly, really gave me a taste of that next level, that professional sphere. But more importantly, after that, I got into coaching and I found that and I saw that the youth baseball coaching community needed the most support. Not only did it need the most support, but there was 2 things that really stood out that surprised me that I didn't take into account. One, there are way more youth baseball coaches than high school, college, and professional combined. Way more. By a factor of probably, 5 or 10 or 100. It's a lot more. There are a lot more youth baseball coaches than high school, college, and professional combined. 2, those coaches, those of you, all of you listening to this that coach youth baseball, you're all smart people. You're all intelligent. You have the intelligence, the mental capacity to do or to understand the concepts that the college baseball coaches and those major league baseball coaches understand. But you have other things that you do during the day. It's not your day job. It's not something you're immersed in, that being baseball. So what I'm trying to be is that conduit between the wisdom, the expertise in the baseball world, and I'm trying to filter it down like a funnel into actionable, prioritized, optimized coaching strategies. And sometimes we're a little bold here at 80-20 Baseball, but it's not to be bold to be bold. I can't stand people, or I should say, I can stand everybody. I just can't stand I can't stand the behavior of people that want to be different just to be different. It's a red flag in the baseball coaching community sometimes because they're trying to be different to sell you something different. They're trying to create a product that isn't necessary or any better than anything else that's out there, but it's just a gimmick or something like that. That's a red flag. It's a fad. It's a gimmick. I don't like that. But being different just to be different is not a good approach to life. I know you all know that. So when I'm coming at you with some bold stuff, some different looks at things, it's definitely well thought out. This is not stuff I'm just bringing out and just testing and throwing it out there. This is stuff that I've seen for at least 10 years saying, does this add up? Do these add up? Do these things all add up? Is this something that was consistent for many, many years throughout the baseball community with different players of all types? So there's a lot of cliches out there, a lot of coaching cliches, but they're not actionable. So you're not going to hear a lot of coaching cliches here. You're going to hear, I'm going to do my best to share with you specific things that you can get better at. Speaking of which, in this episode, I got an email from one of my original listeners, Coach Cosimo. Coach Cosimo asked, hey, Coach Bo, can you share a little bit about what would be a good strategy or some preparation tips for players that are finishing Little League youth baseball that are only a few years away from high school or a few years away from being in college If so, they are already in high school. Some tips, some guidance for those players and those coaches and those parents that have players that are getting ready to go to high school. First off, I would definitely recommend going back and listening to Coach Murray and Coach Murphy discuss in those interviews. That was about 3-4 months ago when those came out. I would go back and listen to Coach Murphy and Coach Murray. The last question I asked both of them was, what recommendations do they have for players that are getting ready for high school? And what are the things that they look for? What are the things as a coach when kids come out to try out for the freshman team or for the baseball program as a freshman that are coming and making that jump from junior high, from 8th grade to high school? What are the things, what are the specific things they look for, and what do they prioritize as a coach when analyzing or assessing a player's ability? So I definitely recommend going back and listening to those because those are two successful coaches. Coach Murphy was part of the 2019 high school national championship team. He coached on that team, played a big part. Him and Coach Weber over there at Cypress High School. They dominated 2019 national championship high school for all levels. And Coach Murphy also had experience playing in the Little League World Series back in the mid-90s. Coach Murray was the Orange County High School Coach of the Year in 2016 and twice led his team in 10 years to the Southern California High School Championship game. Very successful coaches and also successful with players. More importantly, successful with the people that they have on their team, the players, the connection, the rapport. These two were just phenomenal. They were people first coaches. So go back and listen to what they recommend and what they say specifically they're looking for when players come into their program. Now, I'm going to give my 2 cents right now. I think hitters should really focus on hitting, arm strength, and accuracy. And here's why. If you can hit, and if you're one of the top 9 hitters on the team, they'll find a spot for you. They will work to get you better at defense. Of course, defense is super important. Defense wins championships in football, and defense, every team that wins the World Series on the professional level has a great defense. In fact, I've gone so far as to say, I don't think a team can win at a higher level without a very, very, very good catcher, middle infield, and center field, or at least a good defense overall. But that middle, your defense needs to be very good. But when it comes to making the team, you need to prioritize first. When it comes to making the high school team or getting chosen for college, I'll tell you one story. There's a guy I played with in college. They called him the chauffeur. And I haven't brought him up yet on this. His name was Paul McAnulty. So Paul was a cool guy. I like Paul. Really liked playing with the guy. He was one of my favorite teammates. I had a lot of bad teammates over the years. Players I just didn't want to play for, selfish at every level. High school, definitely in college, and some in pro ball. But nonetheless, Paul McAnulty was one of my favorite teammates. And it was just a brief stop. He stopped in. He came from a junior college. I believe it was Oxnard Junior College. And he transferred over to Long Beach State. And I remember the first time I met him was at Blair Field, which is a historical field in Long Beach. Blair Field, he's in the dugout and he's got this shirt on. He's coming on a recruiting trip, or he's just stopping by because he had already committed to come to Long Beach State, and he was stopping by practice to check it out. We were doing an inter-squad game or something of the sort, and he's in the dugout and he's got a t-shirt on that says, "They call me the chauffeur, ... And I'm like, they call me the chauffeur, ... And he turns around and it says, ... because I drive in all the runs. Now, I know if you're listening right now closely, you were chuckling at that one. That was a good one. They call me the chauffeur, ... And on the back, they talk about confidence. He's telling everybody he shows up to the field. And Long Beach State at the time, we were in a good run right there. We had some really good players, quite a few that were getting drafted every year, 5, 6, 7 players getting drafted every single year. So this was a pretty good team at the highest of college levels. And he rolls in as a junior college player, rolls in. I got a lot of respect for JUCO players, big respect for JUCO. And JUCO in California and some states is a whole nother level. It's just really good baseball. But nonetheless, he comes in and he's got that shirt on. I said, wow, that's great confidence. And you know what? When you're hitting, you got to have confidence. And his nickname, obviously, moving forward was the chauffeur. They called him the chauff. So Paul McAnulty could hit, and he could hit. He could absolutely hit. He could hit. He wasn't a big guy, left-handed, but the guy could hit. He could hit anything. He could hit any velocity. He was a really good hitter. His defensive skills, he really couldn't have played at that level. He couldn't have played, 75% of the positions at that level. He wasn't bad. He just couldn't have played at that level. And he definitely couldn't have played in pro ball at about 80% of the defensive positions. He got good enough at first base, but he could hit. And he got a scholarship, then he got drafted, and he played in the major leagues. His arm was okay. He wasn't very fast. He wasn't a bad athlete. He just wasn't a good athlete. You know how I do an athlete test? I always say, how would they be out on a basketball court? That's my athletic test. Put them out on a football field. Let them run some routes. Let them play some defensive back. Put them on a basketball court. That's the best athletic tester. I don't think the Chauff would have done all that great relative to the other players at that level or those levels, but he could hit. So what's my point here? here. His bat got him to the major leagues. Not his arm, not his glove, his bat. Now, if he couldn't hit and he had a major league ready glove or a major league ready arm, well, unless he's a pitcher, we're going to get into that in a second. But as a defensive player, a non-pitcher, you're not going to make the major leagues with just a glove and a good arm, unless you're a pitcher or maybe a catcher. But even catchers these days are expected to hit a little bit. Look at d'Arnaud and look at Will Smith. These guys can hit a little bit. Look at these guys that aren't just easy outs in the lineup. Riding the bat, taking that bat and getting it better, getting better at the plate is something that's going to make the biggest impact. Not the only impact, and you definitely need to be able to play some defense and you need to be able to run some bases. You need to be adequate at the other things. But the bat, I think, will take players further than anything unless you're a pitcher. And if you're a pitcher and you got a really good arm and you have good control and you have consistency, repeatability. In the baseball community, the term consistency on the mound for pitchers is called repeatable mechanics, repeatable delivery. If you have a repeatable delivery, you have good command of multiple pitches, preferably 3. If you have good command of your fastball to different parts of the zone with a good changeup or some type of off speed and a good breaking ball of some type, that will take you pretty far. That could take you all the way to the major leagues, of course, even though you can't hit. Some of them were great hitters when they were playing in high school and youth ball and college. Look at Zach Greinke. Look at some of them that can really swing it. But a lot of them are not the best hitters, and some of them couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. And they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat in college or high school. But they could pound the zone with command, with control. They were competitors, and they had a live, good arm. You know, they weren't throwing 72 miles an hour to get to the major leagues. So if I had to prioritize, we could sit here and say, well, it's all important. You got to be a decent base runner. You got to be this. You got to have, you got to be able to catch a ball. Yeah, I get that. But the two main things that I recommend for youth players to prioritize if you want the best chance to make the high school team, get a great hitting plan, a hitting approach, get good at being a productive hitter, and get a strong arm. I think having a strong arm will always play. Having a strong arm, working on different pitch grips, change-ups, breaking balls, definitely working on a throwing program with long toss included, and also working on those change-ups as you do that, and being really good in the batter's box. If you're really good in the batter's box and then you have a strong quality arm with accuracy, those two things will get you further. I would put the hitting, being a productive hitter, ahead of the arm, the accuracy, and a strong throwing arm, but I would put that right behind it. And lastly, speaking of athleticism, work on the athleticism. Go play another sport like basketball or flag football or regular football. Just do another sport that actually involves being a good athlete consistently and really hones athleticism. Being a good athlete in baseball is important, but inherently the game of baseball doesn't produce, it doesn't improve, it doesn't really grow the athleticism factor of an athlete very quick because there's just not that much going. You're just not twisting and turning and running backwards and doing all sorts of different types of movements, jumping, all this all the time. Where in basketball, that's all it is. You're constantly pivoting. There's a bunch of things that come in with basketball. You have to be a good athlete on a basketball court or you'll just flat out get exposed right away. Skill positions in football, flag football, you got to be a good athlete or you're going to get exposed right away. So be good in the batter's box, get a lot of reps hitting, a lot of reps, just hit, build up that arms, get the good throwing program going, work in that long toss, work in the accuracy, get that changeup grip feeling comfortable, work on multiple pitches. Those are the two biggest things, because if you can hit or if you can pitch, everything else will take care of itself in terms of making the team. Now, when you want to become a really good player, you got to start, as you get to those levels, you got to start then working to be a little bit more well-rounded. But look at Paul McAnulty, the chauffeur, made it all the way to the major leagues, and his arm and his glove and all that never really got that much better. He just kept hitting. He kept hitting, and he was a good teammate. So to boil it down, hit, throw, and play an athletic sport on the side. Soccer's a good one too. I like basketball and football a little bit better because they hand-eye coordination. And of course, I'm leaving out some other sports too. There are definitely some sports out there that will help the athleticism. So be good in the batter's box, have a strong arm that can, make throws across the diamond or from the outfield on in, and then improve that athleticism by playing another sport, a second sport, an off-season sport. Hit, throw, play another sport. Hit, throw, play another sport. Those are the main things. You could say ground balls. Yes, that's good. I'm a huge fan of the ground ball drill. I'm a huge fan of base running at each practice, but ground balls would be definitely a higher priority than base running, in my opinion, because it's much more natural for a player to learn or just inherently figure out how to run the bases. I'm not saying there's that. There's a lot of nuances to running the bases, of course, and you have to be quick, your reaction time, you got to know the situation, you got to know the count, you got to know the outs. There's a lot to it, but kids are running. They're used to running. That's not something something that they need to really work on physically that much. They could always get better. I think sprint work is so underrated. But ground balls is not something they're doing out at recess. Ground balls is not something they're really doing out at the park much. But they're running. They've been running since they were little. The kids start running. Kids start running when they're 2 years old, 3 years old. Well, maybe not 2, but you get my point. They start running when they're young. They don't start taking ground ball after ground ball after ground ball when they're young, just in the backyard with their friends. They're into other things. So running is incorporated into all activities for kids when they're out there at the park, when they're out there at recess or at school. Ground ball is not so much. And that is something that just takes a lot of reps. The smoothness, the feel, the glove work, things like that take a lot of reps. So please do not hear this and say I'm discounting any other areas, and I am discounting them. Just say I'm not ignoring them, and I'm not saying they're not important. What I'm saying is we have to prioritize what are the main things, what are the biggest needle movers when it comes to getting prepped for high school, for youth players that is, and for college ball for high school players. Get the bat better. Speaking of my last episode, Tommy Nicholson probably wasn't even the best shortstop on his high school team. There probably was other players that were better, but Tommy Nicholson was the best hitter in Southern California. He was the best hitter in Southern California his senior year and maybe his junior year. He was the best hitter. So thus, he was the player of the year for Southern California and led the team to the championship and a top 5 national ranking. Coach Tommy Nicholson, which I talked about in last week's episode, he didn't have the strongest arm. He probably had like the 7th strongest arm on the team. If you really took him out and radar gunned him and you did distance and stuff, I'm guessing he was probably middle of the pack with his arm. His defense was dependable. He was very consistent, but he wasn't getting the balls in the hole like Ozzie Smith. He didn't have the range like that. He was good and he could get the plays. He made the routine plays, which was massive. That's so important. But he could hit, and he could hit at another level, And that he rode to a scholarship to the University of Texas. I think he made it all the way to AA, and now he's a head Division I college baseball coach. What I think separates 80-20 baseball from all the other resources out there, I truly believe this. I'm not just saying this to toot the horn of this 80-20 baseball podcast or our website. What I'm saying is I truly believe 80-20 baseball, our goal, what we're trying to do is accurately prioritize each part of coaching, each part of the game of baseball. So it's not just, hey, we can do this and I got to drill here and we got to drill for this and we got to work on that and we got to work on this, that, and the other. That's easy to do. That's easy to talk about. It's easy to just come up with a drill. It's easy, or it's not that difficult, in my opinion, to say you got to be good at this, that, this, and then list out 75 things your team needs to work on. That's not the hard part, in my opinion. The hard part is connecting the dots to what those actions and the specific things that you can train and get better at and the impact they're going to have in the game and on the future of those players' careers. That takes some dot connecting. If you just looked out at a baseball field in a game, you could see, well, there's some ground balls, some fly balls, base running, pitching. Okay, we got to work on that. The next step, and this is what we're really focusing heavily on here at 80-20 Baseball, is simplifying it down. We're trying to first identify the main and filter out and really prioritize the main important ingredients to being a successful baseball coach and successful baseball player. We are trying to prioritize it. We are focused heavily on prioritizing the importance of each action and each thing that we can train and coach up. And then from there, the second part of the equation at 80-20 baseball is to train it at a high quality by simplifying those steps, those actions. When I go to coaching conferences or when I listen to other baseball things, it's a lot. It's just more. It's like adding more. What I want to know and what I'm trying to do here is prioritize, first off, what is the most valuable thing to a player or to a coach, and then work from there, figuring out the order of the priorities. And then this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot because it's easy to talk in complexities. It's easy to just ramble on about a training technique or a strategy. What really I think is hard to do, what's really hard to do, takes a lot of time, is to synthesize things down, to boil them down to the needed, to the necessary parts, and then prioritize those steps and what's the most important to say, like the hitting approach, the hitting plan, or pitching, or the practice organization. First, prioritize everything that needs to be practiced and trained and coached up. And then 2, how to do it in the most simplified, streamlined approach, the highest quality approach and way. You know, I remember Google starting back in the 90s, and my mom was teaching some C++ classes back then. She taught some AP computer science classes. And I remember her telling me about this, and it wasn't even a big deal. I was so into sports and my life. And this was before internet was really what it was. I mean, this was probably just right before they started sending out those AOL CDs where you could get free minutes on the internet. Most of you remember those, like where it would literally ring on your phone line and take your phone line up while you were on it. And I remember my mom talking about how Google was going to be better. And I remember her saying, this is why. And there was all Alta Vista, there was Yahoo, there was probably like 6 at the time, or 5 or 6 different search engines that were coming about. And my mom said they're the best because it's clean. You go to their website, you go to google.com, you just go there and it's just clean. There's not a bunch of stuff. There's not a bunch of ads. There's not a bunch of links everywhere. It's just clean. It's straightforward. It's just a search bar. That's it. And she said that's going to separate them. She said this before they even went massive. I mean, they were already a big company, but I mean, they weren't massive and they weren't the dominant. There was quite a few that were right there. I mean, Alta Vista, Yahoo, those were other search engines that people were probably using more, but then Google just blew them all out of the water. And my mom said early on, she's like, they're simple. They've simplified it. And that to me gets undervalued, under-discussed, not just in the coaching community, not just in the baseball coaching community, but the world at large. We need to simplify things. I think simple is what makes things better. I think Einstein said something like, we should try to simplify everything to its most simple form, but no simpler. But nevertheless, I'm not trying to say, going back to telling coaches and players how to prep for the next level, for high school, for college, for pro ball. It's not about saying no to everything. It's just about ordering and making sure the priority order is correct and accurate in terms of how it's going to move the needle. What are the results that are going to come from it? If players can hit, if they can hit, they'll find a spot on the field for them. That's an old adage in baseball. If he can hit, we'll find a spot on the field for him. There are some limitations to that, and eventually that might not get you to where you need to get to. Eventually you're gonna get to a level where that's not gonna work as well. But definitely focusing on a good hitting approach, being a productive hitter, and or having a strong, accurate arm, because that allows you to get out on the mound and pitch a strong, accurate, repeatable throwing delivery. That's always good. So if you can pitch and you can hit, you're gonna find your way. And then play an athletic sport on the side. Get something. Go play some soccer, some basketball, some flag football. And now last but not least, be a kid that hustles, that's coachable and respectful of his teammates. This should go without saying for all of you that have been listening to this podcast for the last 2+ years. You know this is first and foremost. As a coach, you never put a player on your team that's a bad apple. Never. Doesn't matter if they're the best hitter in the league. Doesn't matter if they're the best pitcher. A bad apple needs to stay way far away from your team. Doesn't matter how talented they are. Don't fall for the talent tease. You want players, first and foremost, above all, that are coachable. They're good teammates, high hustle type of players. So that first and foremost, that goes without saying. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of coaches out there that I feel are still taking on players based off of their swing and their arm and how good a shortstop they are. And they overlook and they don't factor in enough the attitude and the coachability and the character of the player. Be a good hitter, be productive at the plate, have a strong, repeatable throwing delivery, have a strong arm that's accurate, play another sport that builds athleticism. Also get away from baseball for a little bit. Doesn't mean you can't keep training. Doesn't mean you can't keep training on the side. I played football and basketball in the off season, but my dad kept taking me down to get pitching lessons. I'd still go to the batting cages. So you can still do that stuff. You can still continue to work on those things. Be good in the batter's box, have a strong, accurate throwing arm, play another sport that builds athleticism, also give yourself a little bit of a mental break from the game, and be a coachable player, a good teammate, a Charlie Hustle type of player. Sure, there are a lot of other things that could be worked on, like being a good base stealer or a good outfielder, taking good routes, or an infielder that has this massive range, or the fastest player at the school or the fastest player in the league. Yeah, there's definitely some things that could be improved and shouldn't be neglected, of course, but the priorities are be a productive hitter, have a strong, accurate arm. If you can, play an athletic sport in the off season, and be coachable, have hustle, be a good teammate. To wrap this up, what we just talked about in this episode is a little different than what you're going to necessarily practice with your team. It's going to be a lot of overlap, of course, a lot of overlap. But what you're going to do with your own son, your own daughter, and working to get them ready for high school, baseball, softball, whatnot, or college, this individual training that I talk of, this is really the hitting, the throwing aspect. When you get your team out there and practice, when you're working with your team, you have to stick with some different priorities because you're going to get ready for a game that needs to be synced up. You got to get the ground balls going. You got to work on some base running. You have to work on all of the aspects to a certain extent. Just make sure you allocate that time accordingly. Really what we hit home on today was how to prep an individual player for the next level. So you don't want your player to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. You really want them to be a master at the plate. You really want them to master the accuracy and control and arm strength, a good teammate, high hustle, and go from there. All right, coaches, thank you for showing up. Look forward to being back here next week as we kick off 2022. Next Tuesday's episode will be the first one of the new year. Look forward to seeing you back here as we continue to mold our coaching paradigm, our approach as coaches. Also keep in mind, we're going to have a pitching webinar, a pitching clinic webinar towards the end of January. So just throwing that out there. The exact date is not set. You can email me, Coach Bo as in Bo Jackson, Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com, Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com, or you can go to the contact page on 8020baseball.com and send it through there. Let me know if you'd like to sign up or you're interested in more information on the pitching clinic that's slated for a month from now, the end of January, where you're going to learn the optimizing of the pitching delivery, how to build up the pitcher's strength and conditioning, and some in-game pitching strategies, some of these big in-game pitching strategies that all pitchers should at least have in their toolbox when they go out there to the mound. So email me, Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com about that. And until next week, until next year, 2022, take care of yourselves and your health. Take care of those families. Take care of your team, your players, by being the best coach you can be. Until next time, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.